Good evening and welcome to Wake Up Later with Sonia Poulton and guests. It is Wednesday, the 9th of April, 2025, and I am your host, Sonia Poulton, an all-round troublemaker. I'm a journalist, I'm a broadcaster, and yes, I am a troublemaker, and proudly so. How are you all? Welcome to Wake Up Later, the show that has no heroes, only guides, no sacred cows, only the truth. So what's on our show today? Documentary maker Malcolm Clark says it's a disgrace that actor Stephen Fry was recently knighted, and he joins us later to explain why. Get ready for this one, kids. And performer Deacon Martin talks us through his unified theory and the exploding database. Literally, you have to see it to believe it. Oh, yes, you do. And can I just say, for this show in particular, because of some of the topics we're going to be discussing, please watch out for defamation in the comments. There are several high court cases which seek to make content creators responsible for the comments on their videos. And I'm not taking the fall for anyone else's defamation. So if you post libel, it will be deleted. Oh, yes, it will. Indeed, it will. I hope you're all well, you beautiful people. Hello to our mods, of course, and Jen is joining the live show on a Wednesday evening for the first time. She said the sun is out, so I'm going to pour a beer, sit in a comfy chair and listen to the best journalist I know. I love you, Jen, you're a star. And hello to lovely Sam on X, who wants me to let you all know that there is a global day of civil disobedience which is organized in aid of Palestine, and that will be on April the 22nd. More details to follow. How are you all? How are you all? I hope you're all well. Lovely to see you all. Lovely to see you, Drum. How are you, mate? And Cara and Simon and Randy and all of our mods, of course, are there. Names are going so fast I can barely see them, but I hope you are well. I want to turn to the headlines. We've got a lot to pack in, so I'm going to get cracking, right? First casualty of the Online Safety Act. Anybody else seen this? Video sharing platform Bitchute, who have released a statement that with immediate effect, Bitchute platform users in the UK will no longer be available to view content produced by any other Bitchute user. So it's quite complicated what they're actually saying. They're saying that users outside the UK may share UK user produced content to other users outside of the UK as normal. In other words, for users in the UK, including content creators, the Bitchute platform is no longer a user to UK user video sharing service. And they say after careful review and ongoing evaluation of the regulatory landscape in the United Kingdom, we regret to inform you that Bitchute will be discontinuing its video sharing service for UK residents. We saw it coming. It's a joke. Marcus, are you telling me it's a joke? No, that's not a joke, right? Are you? Wait. Sometimes it's quite difficult to work out whether somebody is telling you. And so it begins. Yes, it does indeed. No, this is real. It's absolutely definitely real. Rumble next. This is just a test case. Oh, I got you. Fine. Thank you. Threw me momentarily there. I thought somebody had wound me up, but no, it's bad news. And so it begins, as our viewers say. And can I just say this, because I think it's really important, and that is UK Parliament has too many holidays. The House of Commons is now in recess for the Easter holiday. The House will next sit on the 22nd of April. They broke up yesterday for Easter, but not before an explosive announcement from Jess Phillips about child abuse in this country. There's a lot to unpack, and it's not as straightforward as it's been portrayed, but I do absolutely agree with her about one thing at least, one thing at least, and that is the opportunism the Conservatives have displayed around the grooming gang issue is absolutely obscene, seeing as they had a couple of years at least to fulfill the recommendations from the child abuse inquiry, and they failed to do so. And they're jumping up and down now, right, is all about opportunism and party politics. They are not and have never been interested in stopping child abuse in the UK, but the ministers now pretend they are, that Labour is in power. And I'll look into that in more detail on Friday, what Miss Phillips' speech really means for us. But it does look increasingly like they're taking the millions that was intended for the local grooming gang kind of like type of inquiries and redistributing it elsewhere. And Robert says in the comments, hey guys, great news. The police in America have taken down an international child transportation ring. Good. I saw that briefly again. I'll catch up with that more for Friday. And another in our series of The Deep State Ain't After You, bruv. You might just be a wrong un. And to that, I refer to the likes of allegedly Lawrence Fox, Joey Barton, Russell Brand, Andrew Tate, today's toxic influencer under the legal spotlight is none other than Dan Wootton, one of the most reprehensible tabloid hacks in recent history. Yesterday, in the High Court in London, it was claimed that Wootton had previously pretended to be a woman called Maria Joseph in order to trick a former work colleague into sending intimate pictures and explicit videos. Interestingly, on the same day, Dan Wootton chose to publish a list of the 50 worst people in the UK. Well, you know what, Dan? In the words of any number of your rancid, racist guests, you can always leave and go back home, you know. You can. I don't believe in re-migration, but I'd make one exception for this man. Oh, yes, I would. I'd pack him off back to his native New Zealand as fast as his little propaganda legs could carry him. We have enough of our own homebred toxic media influences. We don't need to import them. We definitely don't. But how interesting that he chose to publish such a list on the day he was featured in the High Court, where he is accused of catfishing and acquiring intimate images by deception. So what's the court hearing saying, really? Well, essentially, former colleague of Dan Wootton claims that he was tricked by the journalist into sending intimate pictures and an explicit video of himself. In written submissions, the man who can't be named told the court that Mr. Wootton sent the man partially and naked photographs of a woman, as well as a video of a couple having sex. Mr. Levinson, who is representing the man, said the man had been deceived by Mr. Wootton into believing he had been exchanging messages with the woman in the images. The hearing heard that as a result, the man thought he was talking to a woman who was interested in a sexual relationship, and that as a result, he sent intimate photographs and a video of himself carrying out a sex act. Mr. Levinson, as I say, representing the man, told the court that Mr. Wootton had tricked the claimant into providing these images. The man subsequently became aware that Maria Joseph did not exist and that he had, in fact, sent the images to Dan Wootton. At the hearing, Mr. Wootton sought for the man to be named publicly, but the judge refused. Mr. Wootton's barrister, Samuel Rowe, argued that when a court order was made earlier this year granting the man anonymity, Mr. Wootton was not given sufficient notice to be able to challenge it in court. Added to which, Mr. Wootton has been investigated by the Metropolitan Police and Police Scotland, and both forces had come back with NFA, no further action. So Mr. Levinson, representing the anonymous claimant, told the court that as far as he was aware, those investigations did not relate to the claimant's complaint, but to similar ones. The judge rejected Wootton's arguments and said there was clear evidence of potential adverse and seriously adverse effects on the claimant if the claimant's name was in the public domain in this case. Dan Wootton is yet to file a defence for this civil claim for damages. And it's important to know it is civil claim, it's not criminal. This could be because it is at an early stage in proceedings, but it is also a known court tactic, and I'm not accusing Mr. Wootton of this, that some people who delay filing defences are often trying to game the system, and the court knows this. Absolutely it does. Was it the case that Wootton and his legal team hoped that by attempting to reveal the identity of the accuser, it would deter that man from proceeding, ashamed at what had taken place? I don't know the answer to that, but either way, Wootton didn't get what he wanted. I'm absolutely delighted that the claimant is being represented by renowned child abuse solicitor Dino Novicello. Dino is a no-mess person who I've frequently interviewed, and I think he's absolutely brilliant. I have seldom hidden my disdain for Dan Wootton. He was a long-term Murdoch puppet, a true tabloid hack that stained British journalism alongside such toxic individuals as Piers Morgan and Vanessa Feltz. Wootton has contributed to the lack of faith in British media because his first port of call is sensationalism rather than the truth. I made several videos last year about Wootton when these allegations first surfaced, and they are available on my YouTube. And I watched how he inveigled his way into the so-called truth movement by speaking out against lockdown. But Wootton is an establishment tool and always has been. His extensive commentary on Meghan and Harry is because his role is to absolutely prop up the British establishment. Absolutely it is. And anyone remember when he faked the laying of flowers following the death of Queen Lizzie? And he did several takes which were observed by onlookers. That's who Wootton is, a media parasite. And I'm so glad to see someone has taken him on. I will watch this case with interest. And I hope you are all absolutely well in the comments. I hope you are. Hi, everyone. Says everything is okay. Hi, everyone, indeed. Right, before I bring in our first guest, I'm just waiting for him to join. I'm disturbed by two pieces of news, by the way, where scientists are clearly messing around with nature and the outcome could be frankly disastrous. There's this genetic engineering company in Texas who has brought the ancient dire wolf back to life and is now working on de-extincting the woolly mammoth, the dodo bird, and the Tasmanian tiger. The project aims to restore species that have been eradicated, at least in part due to human activities such as overhunting and habitat destruction. It involves extracting DNA from fossils and other specimens, comparing it to a genome of the closest living relative, then make an egg cell which is implanted into a surrogate. I'm uncomfortable even describing it. I don't know how you all feel. After my next guest, I want to talk about the first baby to be born as a consequence of a womb transplant in the UK. Yes, I am deeply uncomfortable that we are messing around with nature like this. Of course I am, because I'm that type of person. Right. On that note, I want to play your video. Check this out, right? Actor Stephen Fry, who we are repeatedly told is a national treasure, recently made a video about the importance of facts. And here's a clip from it. Check this out.
Misinformation. What a polite little word for something so utterly corrosive.
Oh, it's just gone off. What a polite word for something so utterly corrosive indeed. Why are you not playing, Stephen? Well, anyway, what he actually says in this, I'm going to remove this and I'll tell you what he says. He talks about how facts matter. And they do matter. Absolutely, they do. Which is why I'm about to talk to a man who knows a great deal of facts about Stephen Fry. Let's bring him in. Here he is. Malcolm Clark. How are you, Malcolm? Oh, can anybody hear Malcolm? Because I can't. We did a test earlier and it was perfect. Hello. You can always go out and come back in again. Sometimes that works. Yeah, he's not muted, actually. Nope. Here we go. Any second. I know he's going to do it. I have faith. That's it. Go back out and come back in again. And right, I have 3. Unfortunately, they are only ornaments. What's that? What was that? Don't worry, we're going to bring him in. By the way, I found my badge. I'm living my best life. Yes, I am. Yes, I am indeed. And it's really funny because I interested to hear this. I've never heard anything about Fry, but I always query people who get knighted and are so in our face publicly. Well, we have rather a lot to talk about Stephen Fry. And the reason that I really want to talk to Malcolm about this is because Malcolm is he's not only a documentary maker, but he's also somebody who has written some of the best threads around Stephen Fry. And I think they are absolutely worth commenting on. Let's see if we've got him now. Hello. Oh, it's such a sod because it literally worked for us earlier. Unplug something. Hello. Still silent. It is. I know. And it's a sod, isn't it? Sometimes this happens. I mean, I think we're still in Mercury retrograde, although I don't think that's it. But I'm sure that Malcolm is going to connect to us any minute. There he is.
The internal microphone, right?
There we go. Woo!
I'm going to put on my own special one and see what happens.
Well, we've got you.
Is it still good?
Yeah, we've got you.
Fine.
Yes. Absolutely brilliant. Wonderful. Everybody, this is Malcolm Clark. He's not just a documentary maker. He was also involved in the formation of LGB Alliance, which of course has been hugely controversial, but now hugely successful, which is often the way. And you became very well known for your evidence-based and factual threads on X. One recent one was in response to the video that I just attempted to play, where Stephen Fry is talking about the importance of facts and how they matter. And you are not happy about that, Malcolm. In fact, you have a Substack. We've put a link in the description already. It is titled Stephen Fry and His Boy Problem. And you go so far as to say that Fry has minimized the sexual abuse of underage boys in his work. That's a big statement. It's a big statement. But Malcolm has come with the receipts. So take it away, Malcolm. Where do you want to start off with that statement?
Well, I started getting interested in Fry. Obviously, knew all about him, like everybody had heard of him. But then in November last year, he did an interview with the trigonometry guys, and it's one of two or three of the trigonometry shows which I sort of feel show how little they actually know about the gender debate, because they were praising Stephen Fry for actually saying very little, except, maybe J.K. Rowling shouldn't have murder threats. And this was considered to be very courageous of him, when in fact, he has a long track record on the opposite side of the argument. He donated money to help a biological woman have a phalloplasty. He's constantly supported the whole gender ideology nonsense. And so I was annoyed that he was being given a sort of pat on the back for doing absolutely nothing in November. And so I started to look. I didn't know enough about his career and discovered that he had written a whole series of novels. His first novel, called Latin, involved a relationship at a public school, a relationship between a adult teacher and a 13-year-old boy, and it celebrated this relationship. The boy and the teacher then run away to Morocco and discover it's a paradise where boys and adults can have successful relationships, inverted commas and all of these, and so much so that they write home to the other boys, and the other boys petition to go to Morocco. I was like, I cannot believe this. Like, how did I not know this about this guy who's, as you in your introduction, you said we're all told he's a national treasure. I didn't know about this, and so I then looked into it more and discovered he has a long track record in most of his work in at least minimizing the dangers of this cross-generational sexual relationship. And so I then looked at again and again, and then the reason I wrote The Boy Problem was I found that because I began to think, okay, I always try to give the benefit of the doubt. I thought these are fictional works, and they don't necessarily represent the point of view. You never know. But then discovered that he'd made statements himself as Stephen Fry, where for example, he'd urged people who had suffered child abuse to stop moaning about it. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. And I thought, okay, so the barrier between the fictional and the real, the factual Stephen Fry is not a huge one. They seem to share this sort of minimizing child abuse. And so I then, did more research and discovered that in 1990, I got the date here, he basically did an article in The Guardian where they'd asked him to write a letter to his 16-year-old self. And I think it was in 2009. I don't know.
It was, yeah.
2009. And I looked at this and I was amazed. He was basically saying that he was talking to himself and saying, like, you back in 1973, which when Fry was 16, you were looking in the library, looking for inspirational characters. And he then provides a list of the people in queer people in history, art, and literature against whom you can hope to validate yourself. And a lot of them I'd never even heard of. I mean, there was Leonardo, Tchaikovsky, Oscar Wilde. We've all heard of them. Now, what most people don't know is that there's a little thread that runs through even those three famous names. I mean, Tchaikovsky had a penchant for 14 and 15-year-old boys, not only, but did have. Oscar Wilde called his excursions with, I say underage, there was no consent in those days, but even boys that we would consider today underage, he described this as feasting with panthers, because in those days they were basically they were underage prostitutes.
Right.
And he when he traveled, he exploited boys as well. They would be served up to him by various friends. So although we all like to think of Oscar Wilde as this great hero, he has a dark side too.
Right.
Leo's, I say boyfriend, is the boy that he began a relationship with, which would last for 20 years. It's thought to have been 12 or 13 when he started this relationship. Saliera, I can't remember his name. Anyway, but these were the most respectable of the characters in this long list. If you then look at the other ones like Wilhelm von Gluden, Robin Moam, Jean Genet, there's only, I said in my thread and in the article, I think there are only about 3 characters.
Right.
There are, I think, 20 in this list, and only Georges Cavavé, the Greek, Alexandrian Greek poet, I found no link to paedophilia. And Mary Renault is the female author, lesbian author. She did write a book about Alexander the Great's eunuch boyfriend, but other than that, there is nothing that links her with paedophilia. All the other ones are the most ghastly paedophiles. Actually, Jean Reschi is another character. So 3 of them have absolutely no link that I could find to paedophilia. The other ones, I mean, one of them in particular who I'd never heard of, Roger Périfit, who's a French writer and playwright of the 40s, 50s, maybe up to the early 60s, was a rampant, violent, sadistic paedophile who would journey to French colonies to exploit and rape boys. His friend Mother Long was exactly cut from exactly the same cloth. And so I was left with this, I was really shocked because I got that Fry minimized in his own work. And I thought maybe this was a coping mechanism because he himself had said that he'd been
right.
raped or
right. I mean, I've considered that element of it as well. And we always have to, don't we? And I'm always reluctant about covering these because I don't want it to be like, a homophobic discussion. I know I'm in no danger of that with you, which is perfect, frankly, because we don't want it to go there because it's either right or it's wrong. It's as simple as that. And the minimizing, obviously, of child abuse is really disconcerting. There's clearly a theme running here. You also talked about on that thread another book of his, Hippopotamus, right?
Which was, I mean, and again, I kept trying to give him the benefit of the doubt because he wrote Latin, I think, when he was like 22, his first play. And then I think it was around about, I mean, he's such a giant ego that he wrote a memoir at the age of 26, which is Hippopotamus. What was it called? Oh God, it's Moab, Dish of Moab.
That's right. That is what it is. Yes. I mean, your thread is brilliant. And as I say, what's great, obviously, it's evidence-based. It's factual. I mean, that is the reality. When we're making no big statements here about Stephen Fry, other than we have a concern.
Oh, no, absolutely. And so I was beginning to think, okay, well, maybe that, he wrote all of this stuff when he was young. He even wrote a memoir, when he was young. And so Hippopotamus, which was his second novel, maybe that was just, craziness. But then I noticed that a movie had been made really recently, like maybe 2014, 2015, of Hippopotamus. And Audible had, because of that, had done a new recording of the book. And Stephen Fry was the guy who did the narration. So it's not like he has disavowed this. And in the novel, in the film, it's a 16-year-old. But in the book, it's a 15-year-old boy. So it's underage. And in the book, he has these incredible, charismatic, almost magical powers, this adolescent boy. So much so that all these adults feel they need to have sex with him. He has sex with them all. and men and women, and they all feel that they've been cured of some amazing disease. Spoiler alert, I mean, they haven't been, but I don't suspect anybody here is going to, be reading it urgently to find out.
No, I suspect not either. And also, I think it's interesting. Of course, there's a 30-year age gap between him and his husband, isn't there? It's a significant. That's.
Well, when I did the thread, a lot of people, gender critical and otherwise, were saying, "Oh, well, I could tell that because look at the age of his boyfriend." I don't go there because I think, well, it detracts because he's defending in his work and has celebrated in his work flagrantly illegal activity. And I think,
fair point.
His boy, I mean, I can't remember how old the boyfriend was when he met him. I think he was maybe 19, 20, but
he was young.
Yeah. And there's a huge age gap completely. But then nobody said that much when, I don't know how young Wendy Yang or Wang was.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I did a whole series of men, older men, who were dating or had married very young females. So absolutely, it 100% happens from Charles Chaplin onwards, right? It happens on a constant basis, absolutely. And we shouldn't forget, then you're absolutely right. Why use that when we can actually look directly at what he said to us?
He has that list of, and I think I said in the thread, look, if the boy of 16, Stephen Fry, had a list of these absolutely disgusting individuals who he thought were inspirational, the boy was 16, messed up, weird, whatever. But he was hitting 50 when he wrote his letter to the 16-year-old him. So he's calling rapists of boys, guys who would travel thousands of miles to rape boys. He called them in this letter, in this article in The Guardian, he called them inspirational. And so I'm just, it's breathtaking.
It is.
And then to rub it all in after I had written that, I mean, obviously I wasn't expecting to blow up his career or anything, but what's astonishing is he then gets a fucking knighthood. I mean, it was the trigonometry people who'd made me think, I better look into this guy. But then, do we know? And at the time, everyone's banging on, quite rightly, about the so-called grooming gangs, the rape gangs, where girls were just being, that their suffering was being completely ignored, and people are saying, there's an existential crisis for Britain. It shows that we don't care about child abuse.
Right.
Well, you're just given this creep who writes books about boy rape and celebrates and calls boy rapists inspirational. You're knighting him. So,
yes. It's a fair point you make. It's a really fair point. And I'm quite gobsmacked about it. And apparently he received that not only for the arts, but his work to do with the environment of the arts. So I thought the wording of it was quite interesting as well. But he is very much portrayed as our national treasure, isn't he? But he's constantly virtue signaling. That's what I find most egregious about him in some respects.
We're supposed to. He doesn't quite say it, but it's implied in the fact video that you had there. He implies that we should take ethical instruction from him. And I think, who the hell gave you the right to ethically lecture us on ethics when you are up to your elbows in the most disgusting sort of culture? It's a sort of, and I think in another thread I talked about it, because it's a culture which has lasted for a long time. I mean, really, since the 19th century, there was this, because homosexuality was all hidden, it had to be everybody from Oscar Wilde to his predecessors to people right up until the 50s had this code which was called Greek love, and it was based on their reading of Greek culture, which they thought meant that Greek culture celebrated adult men raping or having relationships or whatever with adolescent boys. For a start, the ideal, I'm not defending the Greeks because
goodness me, no.
But the weird thing is the ancient Greeks weren't even as bad as the Greek love brigade painted them out to be, because the Greek ideal was a sort of was a platonic relationship. I never was completely convinced that it was platonic, but their idea was some platonic relationship between some wise adult man and an adolescent boy of maybe 15, 16, 17. But it was not, there was laws in ancient Athens.
Of course there were. Of course there were. The thing is, though, doesn't what Stephen Fry is saying, doesn't it play right into the hands of like these old stereotypes, this whole idea that gay men are child abusers and we can't trust them? And it seems to prop that up, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, yes, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that everyone's so wary of criticizing someone like Stephen Fry.
Right.
Hanging on about the fact that even although it was a slur on homosexual men, that this implication that all homosexual men were interested in boys, it was not a complete lie to suggest that some homosexual men were. We know this because Stephen Fry's work's peppered with it, and we know that men were arrested for raping boys in the past. I mean, there were, just as straight men predated on girls, and nobody denies that there are a group, have always been a group of heterosexual men who predate on underage girls. Look at the grooming gangs. Nobody denies that. But somehow we've gone full circle where we now deny that any homosexual men predate on boys. And
yeah.
So my argument was, it was always true that there was a group of homosexual men who predated on boys, and boys had to be protected. But somehow we've moved completely to the other side now, where you're not allowed to even mention it.
Right. Except on here, Malcolm, because as soon as I literally, I mean, I hardly see anybody's tweets anymore on X, because obviously we're all shadow banned to hell and back. But as soon as I saw your thread, I was like, that literally has taken the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly how I feel. And I want somebody to articulate it better than me. And you're the man for the job, and you've done it beautifully. And I really do appreciate it. You're absolutely right. We shouldn't not be allowed to raise up questions about somebody who's glorifying, obviously, the sexual abuse of a minor in their books, especially when they're portrayed as a national treasure.
Exactly.
Last word to you.
Well, if we had any doubt that there is a thread that continues of predatory homosexual men who have to be counted out, we only have to look at the recent case of Surrey Pride, where the guy who ran the organization, the guy who founded the organization, is now a convicted paedophile, and nobody was allowed. Nobody. I mean, the thing that shocked me was, even whilst he was charged and in remand waiting to have his trial, Surrey Pride went on. No, but none of the donors pulled their money.
Wow.
No else rushed to distance themselves. It was as if this guy had never existed. He was erased by the LGBTQ lobby.
Wow.
So there's going on where it's almost a sort of shield of immunity. If you're gay, if you're a gay man, oh, we mustn't criticize them. But it's actually it's our responsibility as gay men to call that minority out and make sure they get locked up behind bars.
I hear you. Powerful last word. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. This is Malcolm Clark. He is a documentary maker, but also, really importantly, one of the founders of LGB Alliance. And they came at the time when they were absolutely needed. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us, Malcolm. Take good care of yourself. Have a lovely evening. Malcolm Clark, everybody. Wonderful. I'm so glad we eventually were able to bring him on, because he had a lot of powerful stuff to say right there. Before I bring in my next guest, I want to briefly talk about this womb transplant madness, by the way. This is nuts. I'm sure you've all heard about this, right? I'm sure you have. I'm so disturbed by it. So the idea is, so a woman given birth following a womb transplant. Mother is Grace. The father is Angus. They've named the baby Amy, Amy Isabel, after the mother's sister, Amy, who donated her womb. Grace is 36, was born without a functioning womb, which meant she was unable to carry and give birth to her own baby. I'm really sorry to hear that, right? But I don't like the turn that this has taken, right? Because in 2023, Grace became the first woman in the UK to receive a womb transplant, right, after her sister donated it. And this is all part of the Womb Transplant UK Living Donor Programme. The programme is led by a team of specialists from Imperial College Healthcare. Well, remember what Imperial College did around C19, right? Remember them there, right? This scares the life out of me. It absolutely does. I'm already deeply opposed to renting wombs as they do in surrogacy, but this leads us into a dark new world. I hate to say it, but constantly going against nature will reap negative rewards. Humans are just so unbelievably selfish. We have to have what we want all the time when we want it, even when nature says it's not ours to have. So while I always rejoice at new life, because I cannot blame the baby for the parents, I am deeply disturbed by this development. I think this is really problematic. Who man? Says Randy. Why are they so hell-bent on messing with nature? I know, bringing back extinct wild animals and transplanting wombs. For God's sake, what a sick world. Right, let's become less sick. I want to bring in my next guest who's going to talk to us about actually, I think, creating a better world and how we go about it. And very interesting individual indeed. Right, let us bring him in. If I can just see where I am. Here he is. Deacon Martin. How are you, Deacon?
I'm fine, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you beautifully, absolutely beautifully. You are, of course, a performer. You're deacon in the Church of the Eternal Question. That sounds like my kind of church. What is the Church of the Eternal Question?
Well, it's I sent you a clip about the common understanding, which might be useful to show to your viewers at some point. But in essence, it explains the context for the eternal question, and the eternal question is, why are we here? But in my church, in quotes, we reckon that the eternal question unites us. We're all brothers and sisters because none of us knows the answer to the eternal question. And insofar as we have intelligence, we suspect that our intelligence is expected to be applied to finding out the answer to the eternal question. But the answers are what divide us. The answers are what make us hate each other and torture and kill each other. And that's why I think the church should be based on a question rather than any of these myriad of answers.
I hear you. You sent me your unified theory and exploding database. I'm actually going to show our viewers some of this exploding data. I love it. I absolutely love it. I will put a link in the description so everybody else can play around with it. It's so brilliant. I've already put a link in the description to Deacon's website, but check this out, people. And I'm going to get Deacon to explain this. Check this out. Right now, that may not look like much to you. I'm having some video problems today. Let me try and upload that again because it gives a clearer idea. And let's just try it. Exploding database. There it is. Let's try that again. Let's see if it will come on. Right. So I've played around with it a lot now, and now I've started to click more on the names and the companies that are involved. Did you put this together?
Well, long ago, years ago, I used to do my research. I think I got into it after 9/11, really, because I was always a doubter about Kennedy, and the whole 9/11 thing kind of reignited my concerns. So I started reading books and whatever, and I started to try and track them through a database, and basically spreadsheets. And the whole thing got really tedious, and it slowed down my reading. And to be honest, it exhausted me, and I stopped doing it for a while. And then I came across good old Whitney, and I got her books. I highly recommend her books, as I'm sure you do.
Whitney Webb, yeah, absolutely.
And of course, it's such a powerful couple of volumes. And the real beauty of it is the footnoting, the referencing, and the indexing. And it reignited my interest. And I went back to the spreadsheets, and I looked for a way of making the spreadsheets more presentable. and I came across something called Kumu, Kumu.io, which is an online application. If you upload your spreadsheets in a certain format, it'll create a number of ways of looking at it. And
Oh, wow. I mean, it's so impressive. I love it. I want to bring up this illustration because this is much more easier to understand for many people. This, of course, is the unified theory. You say how it all fits into the 21st century. You said trying to provide a digestible narrative in an effort to throw some of the emergent patterns into relief for readers disinclined to delve too deeply into available research. So tell us what we're looking at here.
Well, it's a good old Venn diagram, of course, and it's just a way of trying to illustrate the connection between corporations, intelligence services, religions, secret societies, and organized crime. And at the center of it, you can see banks are corporations, of course, so they're within the circle of corporations. But where they overlap is called in my parlance is called the overlap, but you'll see there's a little tiny spot right in the middle, and that's referred to as the assortment of non-elected and unentitled sociopaths, and which makes an interesting acronym, of course. But the whole idea is that to label all this as conspiracy theory is nonsense, because basically that's what's happening. That's what's out there. That's what happens, and people within these circles, elements of those circles, get together and they conspire. And what they conspire about, we don't know necessarily. I mean, obviously some of it's come to light, but God knows what they're talking about most of the time. But to think that they're not conspiring flies in the face of all kinds of logic. It just doesn't make sense. People don't get together.
Exactly.
They're not going to talk about the weather, are they?
No, exactly. You say that this is a work in slow progress, bless you, and you drill down on how everyday life is working and how it disadvantages us. It's how it's not really for us at the moment. It's about the big corporations, the secret services, big government, how they all intersect, how they're working against us. Let's look at some of those titles for you to give us a brief overview. Let's start with economics, because that seems obviously that's a key part, isn't it?
Yeah, I think in the document I said that economics is now a more major factor in human living than nature is, to some extent, because we're far more shaped and controlled and driven about by economics than by nature at the moment. And that's a pretty frightening thing, especially when the controllers of those economies are essentially the people who've risen to the top of corporations, which are in themselves, as I've explained in the article, psychopathic organizations. They cannot empathize with human suffering. And of course, the best leaders for those kinds of corporations, those kinds of organizations, are people who themselves cannot empathize with the suffering of human beings. So I think it was John Ronson first turned me on to this whole idea. But the idea is that in the general population, we reckon about 1% of us are psychopaths. But as you gravitate, our organizations, our political and our economic organizations, encourage the promotion of psychopaths. So psychopaths tend to gravitate towards the tops of these psychopathic organizations. And when we say that humans are failing, as a species, we're destroying our planet, we're doing this, we're doing that. It's not really us. It's not you and me, and it's not your viewers. It's the psychopaths who are running psychopathic organizations that are going to destroy us.
You said that we're a trading species. We've been doing it for millennial. It's an ongoing thing. But you say that there are at least two concepts that have emerged which compromise us. And you put that down to property and currency. And the moment I read that, I had a solar plexus moment. When something hits you and it makes a lot of sense. Explain that.
Well, when we were hunters and gatherers, which we were for millennia, right? Primarily, we're still, in terms of time spent. We're still hunters and gatherers at heart. But with the advent of agriculture, the whole business of needing to protect your investment emerged, because you can't plant seeds, in one part of the year and then just abandon it for somebody else to pick up. It doesn't make sense. You have to stay around and look after and nurture your seeds, and you want to reap the benefits of those seeds. And that became property, and property became defensible, and out of all that emerged, larger cities. Because of the success of the agricultural revolution, we began to create larger and larger towns, and we began to have people who specialized, who didn't actually engage directly in food production, which in hunter and gatherer societies you don't have. Everybody's engaged in food production. So one of the classes that emerged, of course, was the warrior class. They emerged in order to protect the investments of the poor people who had gone to all the trouble of planting and are getting ready to pick it up. But of course, this warrior class turned on its own peasantry and began to exploit them. And the whole idea of property expanded to mean not just the land that had been acquired in order to grow things, but the peasants who worked upon it as well. That became part of the property package.
Right. And part of the problem we're dealing with, of course, as you point out so accurately, is we're not just dealing with corporations. We're dealing with corporations who own the news. They own these large news organizations. So obviously, if you own the news, you own the narrative, right? So, and that is greatly problematic. From your worldview, it seems very, I like it. It seems very down to earth. It's accessible to me. It doesn't feel too highfalutin. But in terms of the media and in terms of corporations, how do we protect ourselves from that daily attack on us?
Well, that's the tricky bit, Sonia. And so what I say, I present things like this on stages, right, and to people that I hope are engaged and not bored. But in essence, what I say to them is that, because it is discouraging. I often say, what does this really mean? It means we're fucked. But then I say, the first step in resolving any problem is to identify the problem. And that's the stage at which I'm at. I'm still identifying the problem. And I don't have solutions per se, except to say that I spent a lot of my time in the cooperative movement. And the cooperative movement is born in the UK and struggled in the middle 1800s against the kinds of things we're still struggling against. And the cooperative movement is now international. And so one of my propositions is that the entire cooperative movement should move its banking offshore. And that what they should do is have, members of these vast, some of them are vast cooperatives, and they're in banking, they're in insurance, they're in agriculture, they're in fisheries, they're in everything, right? And if all of the cooperative movement banked offshore, two things would happen. One is that they'd start, the powers that be would start examining the loopholes and wondering what they can do about offshore banking and how they can stop it, because it's all right for them to do it, but they don't want us to do it. But the other thing is that by diversifying your movement, because your movement is international, it's based in many countries, and your banking is offshore, they don't know where to start bombing.
Interesting. And also, it should be noted, you're not only talking about corporations, you're also talking about the capture of government authorities and departments, such as, for example, the secret services. And I think sometimes it's really hard to penetrate it all, isn't it? Because it all seems so overwhelming. And I think that what you're actually seeking to do is make it less difficult and easier to access, to understand it. And I do think that's what I think you've taken a really good shot at it. Talk to us I do. I really do. And I think that we need something like that to start breaking it down, because what people often do is they go immediately to like BlackRock. Well, BlackRock is doing all of these different things and pulling all of these strings. But there's so much more attached to it that does feel sometimes as if it's quite overwhelming. So the role of intelligence services in all of this, what do you think?
Well, intelligence services are the modern warrior class. And in the same way that the original warrior class turned on the peasants and started treating the peasants as property, so the intelligence services are doing the same. They've turned on us who fund them and made us subservient. And they've done that by fear and hatred programs. And but the really fascinating thing about intelligence services is their links to organized crime,
Right.
which Whitney was very good at highlighting.
Yes.
Because it's been going for a long time, and I don't know if people are familiar with the Opium Wars, but it's always a vague part of history. But there were British corporations who were selling opium in China, and the Chinese started saying, "Hey, can you stop doing that, please? Because you're ruining our economy, our standards of living, our people. You're creating all kinds of problems." And those corporations called on the British military, for whom we pay, we the grunts, we pay for through our taxes, we pay for the military. We sent troops over there and ships to smash up the Chinese and say, don't you ever mess with our opium markets. And those people are still with us. I think in the article I mentioned Jardine Matheson, which is one of the corporations that was involved at that time and is still trading, and one of the stars of David Cameron's cabinet is actually serving. Still, he's a Jardine or a Matheson, I can't remember which, is serving on the board of that self-same corporation. And God knows what they're up to at the moment. I mean, obviously the opium wars are over, and I guess they're not trading too much opium. But it wouldn't surprise me at all to discover that they were.
Yes. One of our commenters quite accurately, Shug, says it isn't actually that the system doesn't have to be that complicated at all. They complicate it up for us. And
Absolutely.
I think that is absolutely the truth, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much more that you cover, and people must read in the links, which we don't have time to cover here now. I mean, you literally go into, for the most part, you see all of this sort of binding the issues of human trafficking and AI. You also talk about religion. As someone who calls himself deacon, you find organized religion ridiculous. Is it part of enslaving us, do you feel?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's also a part of the fear and hatred program. Because despite all the kind of supposed ethos of love and respect for everybody else, it just doesn't work, does it? It always ends up with people torturing and killing each other. And that's why I think we should abandon religions and adopt the question and apply our intelligence to the question.
So we've identified the problem, which you say we need to, but then we have to also start finding solutions, because obviously one of the problems that people like you and I often encounter is we know that there are problems. We want to see the change, but that can feel huge, can't it? Where do we even begin to start to change this world? This is untenable as it is.
As I mentioned, the cooperative movement is something that I think offers a solution. The trouble is the cooperative movement itself suffers from management capture. As soon as a co-op gets really big, they start attracting the sharks, and they start attracting the chief executives on massive salaries, and the whole thing begins to go haywire. But the cooperative movement, in essence, is a source of hope. And if people look into it to some, if people explore it a bit, I think they'll find that there is a lot to be extracted from that and applied to this problem that we've identified.
Right, exactly. I'm sorry, everybody. I just realized I have taken off name tags and I don't know why that happened. I was doing some experiments. They were looking for your name, Deacon Martin. And there are some links in the description down below where you can find out more about what Deacon has done, including the exploding database. Enjoy it, how you can contact him. And, but, you know, from this point onwards, right, because I literally don't want to be part of that old world. I really don't, but I don't want to be part of their new world order either. But there's a huge chunk of us, isn't there? There's a lot of us around who know that we want something different.
Well, there's a principle of social organization called subsidiarity. And this is another potential solution. And to some extent, it's delivered through co-ops, or can be delivered through co-ops. Subsidiarity states that all decision making should be made as local as possible. All the decisions that can be made at the local level should be made by people at the local level. And if you, I mean, highways is a classic example. The local roads, you look after yourself locally. Everybody's can understand that. But if you got an autoroute that's going through your place to other parts of the country, that's perhaps not up to you to maintain. It's perhaps up to a more centralized authority to do that. But the whole business of subsidiarity is you look for ways of pushing the decision making down rather than absorbing it up to the top, which is where we've got ourselves at the moment.
Can you see this question on the screen?
I can't see, no.
It says, please ask him his views on the Deagle report. Are you familiar?
The which report?
The Deagle report. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Ange? Deagel.
I'm not familiar with it.
Right. Okay. Well, that might be something to find out more about. You might find it interesting. That is something that I need to do a deep dive into.
I've made a note. Yeah, I've made a note. I'll look it up.
Wonderful. Jan says, great talk, Deacon. I mean, the thing is that we need to talk more, and then we need to find action plans, because sure. I think your approach is sufficiently different enough that it can make the difference. And that's all we have to do. I do believe for the most part, there's nothing new under the sun, right? But we can make a difference while we're here.
And just, can I put in a little plug for my local studio, Bushrat Studios, who've managed to get one of my songs onto Spotify. So if you look up Deacon Martin on Spotify, you might find my Red Berries track. But Bushrat Studios was a great help to me, and I'm supporting them in every way I possibly can. But I'm perfectly happy to hear from any of your people who want to contact directly.
This is Shug. He's brilliant. He's one of our regular contributors. He's just summed it up nicely. A military report that estimated about a 90% population reduction in a few years' time since retracted. Do you feel there is a population reduction agenda taking place?
I would say it feels very much like that. Yes, I think we know all about the Bill Gates Foundation and the Rockefellers and all the work they did in eugenics, and their interests in that. And it always seems to be the people at the top are taking a huge interest because they think they're the superior beings. And what's not required is those people. They don't need so many people now to plow the land. They'd rather there were fewer people.
Right. They're bringing in their AI, right, to replace us. Do you? I mean, I refuse to partake as much as I can. I'll go to the till in shops. I refuse to do self-scanning, not least because now they've got all facial recognition anyway. And people start sighing, don't they? And I'm like, but I'm actually keeping them in a job. They don't realize I'm keeping them in a job. Yeah. So before you leave us today, what word would you like to leave us with, or what words would you like to leave us with?
I guess not really sure where to start, but I do sermonologies, what I call sermonologies.
Ooh.
So if you're fundraising for a good cause, I can come to you for expenses only, and play a bit of music and I tend to use PowerPoint or the PowerPoint equivalent, and do presentations on economics and history and religion and all that stuff. So if you'd like to if you think that that might help your local struggle, feel free to give me a shout.
You're a star. Love it. Love to hear it, everybody. This is Deacon Martin. Isn't he a star? We love it. Thank you so much for being with us today and spreading some really good, wonderful vibes around this place. Take good care of yourself. Have a lovely evening and a lovely
Thank you very
Thursday.
much.
Lovely
Bye.
to have you with us. Take care. What a sweetie he is, isn't he? Absolute sweetie. Did anyone notice in Kendrick Lamar's halftime show performance, there was an inner circle of people stood up dressed in white and all the people lay around dead on the floor? Very telling. Oh, I'm sure it was full of all manner of symbology going on. Thank you, Deacon Martin, says Jan. Thank you indeed. Right, where are we, people? Where are we? There was one story at least I wanted to do before we started to head out. Now, where was I? I talked about the womb transplant, didn't I? Because that so disturbed me. The other thing that I want to talk about that I think is really important, and that is Labour's Hegelian dialectic. You know what that is, right? A philosophical method developed by GWF Hegel, which describes how ideas evolve through thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. In other words, what is it? Problem, reaction, solution. And yes, the Labour government are doing exactly what many of us predicted they would do. They have been involved with creating a problem of uncontrolled mass immigration, and now they're seeking to find a solution as they are proposing with digital ID. Did anybody see all those headlines? The headlines. Can you believe it? More than 40 Labour MPs have signed an open letter urging ministers to introduce a new form of digital ID to help control the migration system and improve public services. They have said we need a gear shift to reap the benefits of digital identification. Yes, in a playbook straight from the "we told you so" dystopian central, the party that is really still Tony Blair's playground is continuing to push his pet project. And the one thing he wants to get over the finishing line before he departs this mortal coil is digital ID. Absolutely. In fact, in the same way as Blair, when he popped up during C19, does anybody remember? And he was urging us to have digital ID to see who was vaccinated and who was not. And he's now suggesting that it will help detect migrants who are in the UK illegally. He has said that if we use digital ID, and I'm quoting him directly, he said, we know precisely who has a right to be here. He said the same thing about vaccinations. He said, we will know precisely who's been vaccinated and not. Anyway, this open letter from these 40 MPs, I mean, people like this just make me so sick, unbelievably sick. He said, one of them said, the truth is we're moving to an era of digital ID. The government know this and is bringing forward new developments with digital driving licenses and passports, but we want them to move faster, say these MPs. Govern us harder, Labour government. We want them to move faster to ensure the project is comprehensive and joined up and critically bring the public with them. And at the moment, Keir Starmer's government says it has no plans to introduce mandatory digital ID. But come on, they will attempt it. And the only chance we have is to keep pushing back against it, right? And it's interesting. The latest Home Office data show that more than 5,000 migrants have crossed the English Channel in small boats so far this year. And I'd like to quote Lewis Brackpool. He's a freelance journalist. He said this was always the end game. Instead of detaining and then deporting those who are illegally here, the state now proposes digital ID for everyone, forcing the native population to sacrifice civil liberties under the guise of migration control. Authoritarianism in slow motion. And I have to agree with him. Maria said she's going to starve before she accepts a chip. I get you, honey. And also, just to say, regardless that RFK Jr. has done a 180 and suddenly started promoting the MMR jab, a tweeter asked if his organization, the Children's Health Defense, went rogue by publicly disagreeing with him, which is great to see, to which the CHD replied, our mission hasn't changed. Then they say stuff about the MMR that I daren't repeat because we're on YouTube, but it's enough to say that there is serious consternation towards RFK Jr., who promised so much and has so far delivered so little. And what he has is, frankly, reprehensible advice that leaves him with that red stained stuff all over his hands. So I would suggest at this moment in time that he can take his thoughts about the MMR, where the sun don't shine and the birds don't tweet, and stick it where Trump is putting the rest of his tariffs. Anybody see how China is fighting back? See, we're too weak in the UK. In the UK, we should be protecting our businesses, our industries. The problem is we've closed so much of our own industries down, but we should be protecting our industries. This was part of the reason why they told us about Brexit happening, right? We were supposed to be more inward looking, but that's not what's happening. Not at all. Bought and sold out, Robert. Bought and sold out. Right, we're heading out, kids. You know we are. We've only got an hour on tonight. Thank you as ever to our wonderful donators, Catriona, Faye J, John from Coventry, Fred, Catherine, and more and more and more. Behind the scenes video now available. This was when I went to cover the Lucy Letby protest outside Liverpool Town Hall the other week, and it was like me traveling and some imagery from behind from some lovely viewers, and but that's available. And thank you as ever to all the people who donate and contribute to this show, however you do it, right? Whether that is making suggestions for guests or whether that is financially contributing, it is all appreciated. All appreciated. Thank you for being here. Of course, this is just our quick, brief catch up on Wednesday, and I will be back on Friday morning. Thank you as ever to all of our wonderful mods. Do you, Teresa? Teresa's loved the midweek wake up later. Thanks so much. You're welcome, darling. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Stephen. I'll watch back the last bit with Deacon, says Jackie. Jackie, is it your birthday today, love? Is it your birthday? Do you, Maria? Maria adores this show. Thank you so much. Thank you, Francois. I really appreciate that. I got a funny feeling it's Jackie's birthday. Happy birthday, love. And I love CO2. And it is, darling. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Right. Don't forget to keep telling me who you'd like to join me as a guest. I can see one suggestion in the comments right now. Thank you all. Thank you to all of our mods. Thank you to all of our commentators. Remember, people, you're not just special. You're irreplaceable. They broke the mode when they made you. We are all, each of us, different and special in our own unique ways. Don't allow anyone to tell you any different. Have a fabulous Thursday, and I will see you Friday. Love you lots. Take good care of yourself. Thank you for being here.